And particularly when you're talking about a practice, how do you do things differently than other people in your field? And particularly if you're a lawyer, if you want to sell your practice, you darn well better have everything in order.
The first thing I wanted to dive into is your famous 6P framework. So dive into that a little bit for us so that we can start wrapping our head around how to increase the value of our business for a potential exit.
Well, certainly. And I think a lot of people think they own a business, but they really own a job. And so we wanted to take it and spread it out and say, how can you analyze whether you have a business that can scale? Because we want people to take their successful business and be able to scale it, to be able to make sure it's sustainable and then saleable. And you do that by analyzing the core components of your business. We go through the 6 P's. The first one is your people. Do you have enough people on your team? Do you have people who are strong where you are weak? Do you have a mentor? Do you have people in the right seats on the bus to help you make sure that your business is sustainable? And secondly, is your product. What is it that you sell? Is it a service? Is it a product? Is it something that we can leverage and be able to add additional products, license in other areas? And then your processes. You cannot scale a business if you don't have those business systems. It's just like you can't build a house if you don't go down first with a strong foundation and you have electricity and plumbing. Same in a business. Do you have the systems on literally how you answer the phone, how you order your product, how you manufacture it, how you provide your service, how you communicate with your customers, how you market, how you collect? All of those are systems, internal and external, that continue, that allow your business to actually become a business, an economic engine that works for you. And then the fourth one is proprietary. What makes you uniquely you? What's your competitive advantage? What is your intellectual property? Have you identified it? Most times people have not. So let's identify it, let's protect it, and then leverage it. And today, vast majority of the value of businesses are intangible assets, that intellectual property. So it's so important to get a handle on your own. And the fifth one is patrons, your database. So many times businesses end up getting sold for their database. And in today's environment, Bill, one of the biggest issues people have is they get all excited because they have all these followers on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, but you don't own those. You want that. Yes, you want that, but consider that lead generation. You want to invite them home. You want to nurture them back into your database and build that database, because that's an incredible, valuable asset for you as part of your business. And then the sixth P is profit. Now, most people really only focus on the product and the profit. And that's why they own a job, not a business. So we want people to really analyze it and how to prepare yourself from the foundation up, making sure you have a strong foundation, making sure you have good legal agreements with all the people that you work with, so that you truly have an asset. My favorite word on earth, asset.
Wow. So I'd like to dive into a few of these. First of all, is the concept of intellectual property, which I think kind of goes through a lot of people's ear and out the other, because it's not really, a lot of people don't actually follow, as I'm sure you're familiar with the Strategic Coach. We had Dan Sullivan on 2 weeks ago, and Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach is famous for, putting a copyright mark next to everything he's ever launched. And a lot of people in intellectual property based niches, they just take for granted their unique ways of doing things. So maybe could you share a story with us of someone who was sitting on gold uh, and actually ended up codifying that and creating intellectual property out of it without much effort or money?
Well, as you mentioned, I wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad. Well, that was the first 15 books. The second book that we wrote was Cash Flow Quadrant, which
Yep.
we just came up with this idea of different ways we make money on my dining room table. And we put it into a quadrant: ESBI, employee, self-employed, business owner, investor. And not only did we copyright that, but we trademarked it. But it has become a new way of conversation. People use it around the world, and has added tremendous value to the brand as it relates to that. But in that process, because so many people were using it, okay, we allow the trademark to go away because you have to protect your trademark if you have a trademark. All right. But this became such a way of language and a way of conversation that allowed us to get even a bigger play and a bigger impact in the world. But a lot of times people do something and they don't protect it and they don't have an opportunity to establish ownership in it. And that's very important. The way you do business, if I say brown truck, who do you think of? UPS,
Yes.
right? The Swish, Nike, those are things that they aggressively protect because a trademark identifies a source of a good, and
Mm,
that's intellectual property. A copyright protects the expression of an idea, not the idea itself. It's that
mm,
form of the expression. So you can write a recipe, but you can't protect someone else from using that recipe, right? They just can't recopy it exactly the way it is. A patent is the highest level form of protection in the fact that it protects the way you do something, the idea, the invention. And so you want to use a belts and suspenders, my husband likes to say, combination. If you can use all three, perfect. We had tons of trademarks and copyrights and patents at the Rich Dad Company because we wanted to be able to leverage what we were doing. And that shows that certain amount of ownership, and it provides you the opportunity to license it to someone else in a different geographic region, someone else in a different language, somebody else in a different industry. And that is additional intellectual property. Those licenses are intellectual property.
mm. So thank you for explaining that. There's so much there, right, with intellectual property. So I appreciate you diving into that. Let's use a quick example. Picture today you are magically placed into a service business. Okay, you're magically placed into, let's say, a law firm, for example, and you had, let's say 90 days or however time frame you think is reasonable to increase the value of a company. Let's say under 1 year, right? 365 days to increase the value of the company. What process would you go through to increase the valuation of a company in a 365-day time window? If it was your sole focus, what would you project yourself doing to build the value of a company so that at the end of that year, it would be appealing for a potential sale or a higher valuation multiple?
Well, for sake of sounding like I'm promoting it, it is the book. I would go through what I have in the book, those steps on how to identify the value in the company. A lot of it's hidden, and being able to structure it so that you have your agreements in order. You look through them, you have your foundational elements, you have your processes. So many times we might have some job descriptions, or we might have had a standard operating manual when we first started the business. So it's not nearly the same today. So go through and again, get all your operations outlined, understanding how it rolls, because it's a lot easier to manage a system than it is to manage a personality. So when you have a system on how certain something's supposed to go, and the employee that's supposed to be doing that isn't following that system, instead of telling them they're slacking off, you can say, well, here's the system. Why are you not following the system? And so that takes a lot of the emotion and personality out of it. But following through and identifying each one of those areas allows you to really start feeling better about yourself as to what you've built, but you're also fine tuning it, and you're finding that hidden value and being able to bring it to the surface. And particularly when you're talking about a practice, how do you do things differently than other people in your field? And particularly if you're a lawyer, if you want to sell your practice, you darn well better have everything in order, right? All your formation documents, all your legal agreements. It's like the accountant who, has a messy book. So the cobbler who children has no shoes. As you want to make sure that you're showing that you've demonstrated it within your own house, that you know what you're doing.
So a question here is, if we were to assign percentages to different factors, like, for example, brand, consistent lead generation, some metric around operational efficiency, what would you say were like, if you were to allocate percentages to certain categories of a service-based business, that would contribute to its value, where would you put a percentage assigned to maybe brand, lead generation, operational efficiency, team, et cetera?
Well, I think, Bill, that the answer to that would be different based on the industry that you're in.
Okay.
I think it's very important to look at each of those and determine. So, for instance, if we go back 40 years, Fortune 500 companies were 85% bricks and mortar, 15% intangible assets. And today it's the exact inverse of that. In fact, it's closer to 90% intangible, 10% tangible, because the world has changed. You look at Airbnb, it's one of the largest hospitality companies, has no hotel ownership. Um, uh, Uber, one of the largest transportation companies, they own no vehicles. And so the world continues to change. And so a corporate legal practice is going to look very differently from a real estate legal practice. And so I think it depends on the industry. And I think within your own, every company, it's very important to have a lead generation system that helps you continue to expand. Now, if we're talking about legal practices, one of my dear friends is one of the top divorce attorneys. She does advertising, but most of her stuff comes from referrals because she has very high profile cases. And so within each industry, a practice can be unique that way. And so you really need to go look at historically where it's been. Okay, historically, how does this percentage look? And is there a place I need to tweak it to really expand so that I can scale?
So if someone really wanted to, sell their business or build the maximum valuation, do you see oftentimes that people will go through like a 1 to 2 year, like maniacal, almost like a ramp up period where they'll get all these things in check for like this end date where everything will be, kind of all set up? Or do you see that not work for people?
Smart business owners who intend to sell will take the time, not necessarily maniacal falsely, but maniacally wanting to make sure that they have dressed up appropriately and have done their homework and due diligence to make sure. Because what happens if they don't do that? A business owner wants, let's say they want $10 million. And so somebody comes in and they go, well, let's see your incorporation papers. Well, let me figure out where I put them. Okay, well, then that confidence goes down. Let me see the agreements you have with your vendors. We don't really have any. Okay, so your $10 million figure is now down to about 6 million. And then they go, well, I'd like to see your employee agreements. We don't have employment agreements. Okay, so the issue is, do you want to maintain that price? So in essence, actually you end up going up in price because they come in and you have everything handled. You're showing your level of professionalism. You've gone through Exit Rich. This book is also for people who want to buy a business. Use this as a guide to say, is this business, have they done what they needed to for me to buy? Or if you want to invest in a business, Exit Rich helps you go through and say, are they a company that I can invest in because I believe that they're doing what they're supposed to. And so it's really important to do this anyway, whether you're going to sell or not. For instance, you want to build a business to leave to your children. Well, that means building a economic engine called your business, and you build that economic engine by following the procedures that we outline in the book Exit Rich.